Welcome back to Psychic Insights Astrology. I'm Desiree Fultz. Normally when people ask about what your sign is, the general response is the sun sign. So if someone says, hey, what's your sign? And you're like, oh, I'm a Capricorn. You're actually meaning your sun sign. But there's actually three main signs: the rising sign, the sun sign, and the moon sign. In this lesson, we're going to focus on the moon. And then in the next two lessons, we'll focus on the sun and the rising and what makes them different. Your moon sign symbolizes your inner self at the deepest level, the part of you that responds from habit, feelings, and instinct. It represents where your emotional security is and the most guarded part of your soul. If you're a sensitive or emotional person, you may recognize your moon sign qualities more readily than your sun sign, but your sun sign generally dominates your most conscious behavior. The ascendant sign is what you project outwardly and the way you present, and it's also done at a very conscious level, as if you're intentionally wearing a hat to relate to new experiences with. The moon sign represents your unconscious self at the soul level, and these are often the traits that creep out in fight or flight scenarios. The hat comes off, and we see the disheveled hair and the bald spot the hat was hiding. What's under your hat? These traits are who you are inside at your deepest and most private levels. An intimate side of your character only you and those close to you really know. In fact, your moon sign may be very different from or even in conflict with your sun sign traits. No wonder people are so complicated. If the moon sign conflicts with the sun sign, these individuals will often have inner struggles that are not easy to explain or overcome. It can also be described like this. The ascendant represents the clothes and accessories you wear, your personal grooming habits and hairstyle, what people see on the outside, and your body represents your sun sign. Parts of your body are showing from where the clothing do not cover, but there's more to be revealed for the right people. The moon sign can be likened to internal organs and movements within. A doctor might see up in there every once in a while during surgery, or a spouse may see parts of you nobody else has access to. But all three ways to see a person are important. They change based on need and circumstances. One celestial body, many parts and functions. Forecasts based on your moon sign reveal what's happening in your private life, your inner world, with your family situation, and your living conditions. The moon sign has a heavy influence over the roller coaster ride of life and may affect your security, foundations, and emotions, because they target your experiences literally where you live and where you stand naked, like the most inner room of the home where guests rarely venture, the bath, bedroom, and closet, the most private. This is the place where private activities are experienced, where you're stripped down to your core and your most private activities are experienced. You're apt to relate to readings that involve your moon sign much more directly than those with your sun sign alone, because they're more involved in your inner world, which gives vitality and character to your outer world. The moon rules the angular house, the fourth, and these are areas that define your experience. The sun rules the succedent house and is therefore supportive of and driven to enhance the angular house of its quadrant. In a moment, we're going to get into some really esoteric tidbits about the moon that I think you'll really enjoy, but for now, we're going to go over some of the basics. The moon. I react. I feel. The day of the week it rules. Monday. Its corresponding metal is silver, and it rules the zodiac sign Cancer. Its corresponding element is water. It rules the fourth house. Its modality is cardinal, and its classification is angular, so it's a very important house. It's dignified in Cancer and its detriment in Capricorn. Exalted in Taurus and fallen in Scorpio. Its gender quality is feminine. Its temperament is phlegmatic. The organs governed by the moon are the stomach, digestive system, lymphatic system, and female organs. Its basic functions are emotional needs. To react is to respond to something. To feel is to be aware of something through the senses or to have a belief or impression, especially without an identifiable reason. The sun is a source of light and energy in our solar system, and the moon reacts to its light by reflecting it back. All of the heavenly bodies in our solar system react to the light of our sun, but not to the same degree as the moon does from our perspective here on Earth. Thus, these soulful luminaries of our system are the sun and the moon, active and passive, giver of light and receiver of light. Reflection and feeling can be embodied in feminine energies such as sympathy, empathy, emotional feelings, and understanding. The moon, as a passive body, receives or takes in and acts in response to something rather than being the cause of something. This suggests that the moon is related to instincts of survival that tie us to our past experiences, habits, and automatic reactions to outer stimuli. In karmic astrology, we look at the moon to see where emotional security is most conspicuous. These deep emotional needs often come from past life experiences, and we bring with us to this incarnation the reactive habits of past lives. The nodes of the moon give more evidence of past life experience, with the south node representing where you've come from and the north node representing where you're going to. The north node is generally the area of life if we are to develop in the current incarnation to evolve the immortal soul and repay karmic debts from past incarnations. The way we react to situations and circumstances depends on our past learning and past experiences. We react in automatic response without thinking, and we do what we've been trained or programmed to do, either through our educational learning, repeated activities, or traumatic experiences. It's interesting to note that the moon itself is actually a corpse orb. It has no living, active energies of its own, but rather it's a residuum from past life. However, its mass still has gravity and still affects other orbs via reflective and passive existence. A quote from Helena Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine. "The moon is now the cold residual quantity, the shadow dragged after the new body into which her living powers are transfused. She now is doomed for long ages to be ever pursuing the earth, to be attracted by and attracted to her progeny, constantly vampirized by her child. She revenges herself on it by soaking it through and through with the nefarious, invisible, and poisonous influence which emanates from the occult side of her nature, for she is a dead and yet a living body. The particles of her decaying corpse are full of active and destructive life, although the body which they had formed is soulless and lifeless. The moon is dead and cannot support life because humanity and the building devas have been removed from its sphere of influence. The moon is in process of disappearance, and only a decaying body is left. The life of the second logos and the first logos have been withdrawn, and only the latent life of matter itself remains." And that was from The Secret Doctrine, Helena Blavatsky. So the moon embodies the culmination of soul habits from a successive chain of incarnations. This is referred to as a moon chain by a well-known occult author Alice Bailey in her book Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. In her discourses on the soul groups that are incarnating on Earth, not all souls are evolved to the same degree. Therefore, the accumulated chain of past life experiences will not be as pronounced in some natives as in others. This explains why some people seem to be wise beyond their years, while others seem to be of low intelligence and tend to have more animal or primal personalities. And a quote by Alice Bailey from Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. "Every human being in or out of incarnation is a fragment of divinity, an outpost of the divine consciousness, functioning in time and space for purposes of expression. All these souls, selves, or human beings are found, as we have seen, on one or another of the 7 emanations of spiritual energy, issuing forth from God at the beginning of an era of creative activity. They return to their emanating source when that particular cycle is brought to a close. In the interim in between emanation and reabsorption, these souls pass through various experiences until such time as they can shine forth in their exactitude of truth." Alice Bailey, Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. The evolutionary process of soul cycles through various life forms until they succeed at becoming self-aware and conscious about how their responses to environment affect others. The reactive responses are governed by our moon positions, and the areas in which we need to work towards our soul's evolutionary pinnacle will be marked by the north node of the moon. Most of the souls incarnating here are related to the original humans or have evolved from moon chains and come from other worlds. The nodes of the moon and placement of the moon in natal charts give clues about the past lives of the native and what path has already been carved out for the soul's evolution. Rather than the conscious learning associated with creative expression and the exercising of will and agency, the learning related to the moon is from unconscious conditioning, and thus generally refers to learning we receive from early experiences and upbringing, or those deep residual soul scars we carry from past lives. The built-in responses we have as adults stem from childhood and is generally the type of learning thrust upon us by caregivers, parents, siblings, and home environment, these experiences of which we had very little choice or were forced to endure, which builds within us our most automatic and instinctive responses related to survival and security. These automatic responses are tied directly to our emotions rather than intellect, which is why they affect us subconsciously without thinking. Thus, the moon is connected with emotional intelligence, mental and genetic memories, uncontrolled imagination, and dreams that are based in feeling rather than thought. Therefore, when a moon appears in a house, it indicates our comfort zones, and it's indicative of what we do to feel good, safe, and secure, or what we do habitually out of instinct. The moon placement reveals our deepest emotional needs. Actions associated with the moon are related to our deepest needs of survival, rather than what we should or must do to grow or overcome. Its needs are cyclical and deals with the ebb and flow of the tides of life. Certain automatic responses may remain buried until specific stimuli awakens these reactions that are deeply ingrained into our psychology and our genetic memories. The waxing and waning are symbolic of how these emotional responses are buried deeply, and then resurface when forced out by cycles or periods of external events that require a response, especially when circumstances are out of our control, and we have little choice or say in what happens to us. Thus, to react is to change our state in response to outer events. The moon moves faster than the other celestial bodies and passes through the entire zodiac in approximately 28 days, or about 29 and a half, similar to the passing of a woman's menstrual cycle, and spends only 2.5 days in each sign, with a daily motion averaging 12 degrees. Perhaps this is where the long-standing humor originates of how quickly a woman changes her mind and mood, especially when under the pressure of external stimulation. The moon embodies all feminine roles and energies: queen, mother, wife, sister, nurturer, caregiver, fertility, the unconscious, emotions, sensitivity, imagination, dreams, moods, nostalgia, empathy, sympathy, influence, and emotional understanding. When appearing in a female's chart, the moon expresses her status as a woman and represents her femininity and power as a reactive force in the house it sits within. In a man's chart, the moon represents his sensitivity and is often repressed by active masculine energies, and so it will not have as much influence in a man's chart as it would to a woman's, unless he's an extremely feminine man. The moon will also symbolize the mother and the wife, as well as his representation of the ideal woman. Look at the position of the moon to see what kind of traits the native's mother may have had, what kind of traits a native's mother may have impressed upon the child in youth, or look to the 4th house for placements that may appear there. The moon also represents children, as they are still very attached to their mother and have not yet received all of their primary instincts to be able to survive on their own. Interestingly, the sun and the moon both represent care and rearing of children. The sun embodies the spirit of the inner child expression, as well as the protection and mentorship of children. The moon embodies the nurturing protection of home and the emotional security of children. The houses they rule in tandem, the 4th and the 5th, are next to one another, working as a team to defend the safety and well-being of all creation, physical and spiritual, the evolution of humanity. 4 plus 5 equals 9, which is considered a very sacred number in numerology and has a great esoteric significance because it forms the Ennead. In esoteric astrology, Alice Bailey supports the notion that the moon is a dead orb, that the influence of Vulcan and other constellations is actually the force we should look upon when reading moon positions. A little bit more about that in a moment. Vulcan was a small planet proposed to exist in an orbit between Mercury and the Sun. Interestingly, the Ennead has also been known as Prometheus and the freedom from strife, and Vulcan. The energies of the 4th and 5th houses are combined effort, and so is the rearing of children. Also, human gestation is 9 months broken up into 3 trimesters, and it takes genomes of more than 1 to generate life. The ascent of numbers goes to 9, which is teleos, or perfect, because it's generated from the triad, which is called perfect, and brought to its end finished, lacking nothing, necessary to completeness. The number 9, when multiplied by a number, always reproduces itself. For example, 9 times 2 are 18, and 8 plus 1 are 9. 9 times 3 equals 27, 2 plus 7 equals 9, 9 times 4 equals 36, and so on and so forth. So we can see that the moon works with the light of the sun, and all of the other planets or constellations aspecting it to create any effect. Even the mother herself cannot create a baby from nothing on her own. The moon, ruling the mother, is an indicator that feminine energies are being used in combination with other energies in order to express creative ability. Thus, the soulful luminaries work together as one. Even the phases of the moon, which are associated with having a direct effect on the tides and cycles on Earth, are nothing in and of itself without the light from the sun. This is a reflection of light from a dead body that we're feeling here on Earth, and the mass of the dead corpse that work together to form the moon phases. The positions of Vulcan in the natal chart is always conjunct the sun and would therefore always be hidden influence on the results we get from the moon position. Vulcan is within 8 degrees, 20 minutes of the position of the sun, which means it's just barely outside of combustion and makes it difficult to see or recognize. Vulcan rules that process which manifests form from crude matter. As the blacksmith of the gods, Vulcan forges new tools for the expression of consciousness. The sun represents core consciousness, and the moon is the reflection of consciousness, which is why the moon is considered a subconscious form of expression. The results are in our reactive behavior. As we evolve, our automatic moon reactions become more calculated responses. Reactive patterns and compulsions from the past that no longer serve our soul growth are alleviated and replaced with conscious awareness. Vulcan pounds the prima materia into form, while the sun embodies that form with life expression. Just as the blacksmith pounds the crude ore in fires to refine its form until it can be useful to humanity, the energies that influence the moon's position in your chart reveal the tools you can most use in life to overcome unevolved or unhealthy patterns and to grow into an enlightened being with self-governance. Most charts that you cast online do not include an option for Vulcan, but you can go ahead and read the moon positions with an understanding that the moon itself is only a lifeless body that marks cycles and time, and that its influence comes from other energies reflecting from the moon and not from the moon itself. Some other keywords that relate to the energies of the moon: change, dreaming, emotions, fretfulness, lightheartedness, habit, imagination, impressions, indecision, instinctual mind, personal magnetism, negativity, procrastination, psychic, intuition, instinct, nostalgia, unconscious mind, vacillation, visions, agriculture, fertility, childbirth, community, journals, families, creativity, feelings, fermentation, fluctuation, fluids, general public, opinions, softness, health, insanity, instinct, mariners, maternity, moods, mothers, nursing, reproduction, response, tears, the people, water, females, and the stomach. The moon correlates with the energies of the constellation Cancer, also the sign Cancer. Sidereal Cancer dates are July 17th through August 16th. Its mode is cardinal, its symbol represents the crab, its element is water, its ruling planet is the moon, which we've been talking about in this lesson. Its fourth house is rulership, and its polarity is negative. Its gender quality is passive and feminine. In its positive expression, much like the moon, Cancer expresses as nurturing, gentle, passive, receptive, intuitive, emotionally intelligent, empathic, empathetic, protective, security conscious, and home holds priority, subtle and instinctual. And in its negative expressions, Cancer and the moon would be clingy, overly emotional, indecisive, aimless, cold and stingy, moody, easily affected by the moods of others. And now a little bit more about the moon in esoteric astrology. Now in esoteric astrology, the moon is the ruler of Virgo instead of Cancer, and it's the planet of the fourth ray. And the reason is because most people in humanity are focused on the life of the individual or attachments to one's biological karma. Things like emotional responsiveness, attachments, patterns of conditioning, and sociological behavior are all lunar influenced. Those programming conditions are strongly integrated into mass consciousness, which is when it becomes the ruler of Cancer. The symbol of the moon is literally a crescent, and whenever you see a symbol with a crescent shape on it, that crescent generally represents receptivity. So from an esoteric perspective, the moon itself doesn't have any life value, but it stores all of the old information from the past, and that information is brought back with us when we reincarnate, and it's also in our genetic memories. Now we're going to go into a little bit of actual science and talk about some discoveries that NASA has made about the Earth's magnetic fields and the moon's magnetic fields and how they communicate with one another. It's long been noted that the moon affects the tides here on Earth, and most anyone who practices any kind of magic knows that there is a special time during each moon cycle during the full moon where the energies are particularly ripe for good magical workings. But the energy itself isn't actually coming from the moon. As the moon orbits the Earth, right around the time it comes into a full moon, it passes through the Earth's magnetotail. Or in other words, Earth has a magnetic tail. The same magnetic field that a compass responds to, on a larger scale, has an effect on the moon. The moon comes into these energies about 3 days before the full moon, and it takes about 6 days to cross through that tail. And during that time, the electromagnetic activity on the moon is supercharged, similar to the effect of a balloon rubbing on your head, and when you pull it away, the hair is static clinging to that balloon's surface. Or reaching down into a cardboard box full of styrofoam and pulling your arms out and the styrofoam stuck all over your sweater. It's virtually impossible to get off of your sweater because of the static charge. NASA now has enough evidence to believe that when that static charge hits the moon, the dust from the moon actually rises into the air, so it has a physical effect on the moon. Kind of like reminds me of Frankenstein's bride when he says, "Come alive!" and the lightning strikes the body and it brings it to life momentarily. And then it goes right back to being a dead orb once those energies pass. But as those energies are reflected back into Earth's energy grid, those who know how to harness that energy can use it for magical workings and redirect those energies in more productive ways. Rather than being receptive to the energies, they can be more active with those forces. And as you know, in basic physics, mass and gravity all affects one another, so anytime you're standing next to another body of gravity, those bodies are affecting one another. So as the planets move, affect one another. Due to those movements, Earth actually has a slightly flattened shape, and it rotates about as it rotates about an inclined axis, it wobbles around the poles. And a lot of the elasticity is due to the tidal effects caused by the moon. And since neither the Earth's rotation around its axis or the orbit of the moon are perfectly regular, their combined effect on one another create a core of unstable energies, cause fluctuations in the geodynamo. And this is exactly how the precession of the equinoxes has taken place. There's quite a few systems of belief out there that believe the moon was brought here from another galaxy and placed by the Earth for a specific purpose. Some call it a satellite. There is no doubt an interesting relationship between the moon and the Earth's energy grids, and everyone on this planet is affected by that grid. However, those that are aware of it can harness its power. The moon as a dead body is kind of like dead weight, also viewed as a physical veil, which blocks other energies from being seen fully. It is, after all, a receptive energy, so it absorbs. Any other energies coming from planets farther away are obviously going to be affected by the moon's presence. Imagine if you were trying to hear someone talk to you in a whisper, but somebody was standing in between you and that person whispering. You're probably not going to catch everything they say. And essentially, that's what the moon does. In esoteric astrology, it's understood that those who can break free from the energy grid of the moon can actually become more sensitive to the subtle energies being communicated from Vulcan, Uranus, and Neptune, the outer planets, for awakening and for visionary sight and transcendental evolution. So the matrix is actually real, and those that wake up from the matrix can realize their full potential. And once you learn to detach yourself from the magnetism of your lunar past, the outer planets can be substituted for moon placements in traditional functions in the natal chart. So you can look at Vulcan, Uranus, or Neptune. The moon is actually a veil to those planets' effects. So if Vulcan represents the blacksmith, it helps the individual to form new tools for expression of consciousness. So you're less reactive and more consciously affecting the matter around you to become what you want it to be. Growth and awareness leads to detachment in the desires and compulsions of your crude form. Moving past lunar energies to Uranus, the individual becomes more of a vehicle for human consciousness and awakening, freed from the past, more revolutionary, the ability to move beyond what tradition has formed. In a sense, at this point, one wakes up from the matrix. Uranus actually rules astrology, so by studying astrology, you actually expand your consciousness, and it gives you the opportunity to see what you didn't see before, to have the awareness of other planetary energies that you can use more directly than being a reactive force or trapped into the moon grid energies, or trapped into the past or cyclical past of your family history or your genetic history or your past incarnations. This is a way to ascend or rise above the grid that basically traps your light here in this dimensional realm. Looking past the veil at Neptune, one can enter the astral realms. But without proper tools, like beginning first with lower energies like Vulcan and working your way up to the transcendental energies, people can literally lose their minds in the realms of the 12th house or Neptune or Pisces. These are all energies that are related to the same window or gate of light. Neptune is the higher octave for Venus, which rules unconditional love. So once a person can actually use the dissolving energies of Neptune to move past their cyclical past or their karmic past, they can receive redemption in their soul and ascend or move beyond the realm of this particular Earth grid system. So essentially, first harnessing the energies of Vulcan, one begins to think for oneself, and then is awakened by the energies of Uranus, and then receives redemption through dissolution of the individual. Once a person moves from reactive energies and begins to think for themselves, and then awakens to the need to help humanity evolve together, and then forges self-love or unconditional love, one can transcend generational curses, can break bad habits, cycles, and transcend above them.